The Good Woman, The Karma of a Princess. Once upon a time, there was a castle ruled by a wise king named King Prasenajit. In this castle, there was only one princess, and she was widely known for her beauty and wisdom.
The princess, beyond the expectations and social constraints of those around her, believed in her inner strength and conviction and was determined to forge her own destiny.
This story depicts the trials a woman faces and the importance of self-empowerment and compassion found within them. Her story shows how a woman can demonstrate her inner strength and overcome difficult situations to ultimately achieve her own happiness. Once upon a time, when King Prasenajit was ruling the country in the city of Shravasti, the king had one daughter. This princess was very intelligent and so beautiful that everyone would turn around to look at her. So she was loved and cherished by her parents and everyone in the castle.
One day, the king said to the princess, "The reason you are loved and respected by everyone is because of me, the king. You must be grateful for that. You shine because of my existence."
Then she replied to her father, "No, father, it's not because of you. It's because I have the power to steer everything in a good direction. In my heart, there is a pure desire to wish for people's happiness, and that desire manifests as power. That's why people adore and respect me. It has absolutely nothing to do with you, Father. Even if I weren't the king's daughter, this fact wouldn't change."
Don't say such foolish things. Your power is thinner than a piece of paper. What can you possibly do? The fact that you can live happily like this is all due to my power. Remember that well. The dignity as a king, the wisdom and power to govern this country. Without that, we can't achieve anything. The power of the heart that you think of is of no use in this harsh world.
The king and princess repeated this kind of exchange 3 times. But the princess never yielded, saying she had a mysterious power.
The king got completely angry. His face flushed and said to the princess, "Then let's test this power of yours."
With that, the king ordered the ministers at his side to find the poorest man living in the city.
The ministers, having received the king's order, searched every corner of the city and finally found the poorest man and brought him back to their castle. "Your Majesty, there is no one else in this city who lives in greater poverty than this man."
As soon as the king saw the man brought before him, he said, as if spitting out the words, "I'll give you my daughter. A poor man like you would never dream of marrying the most beautiful princess in this country. But this is a test for the power my daughter claims to have. If she truly has the power to achieve something, she should be able to build happiness even in a life with you."
At the king's words of making the princess the wife of the poorest man in town, not only those around them, but the man himself was so surprised that he almost collapsed.
The man just stood there dumbfounded, staring at the princess in disbelief. In his eyes, along with fear, there was a hint of doubt about this unexpected fortune.
However, he could not go against the king's order.
He opened his mouth to say something, but couldn't find the words, and could only nod in silence.
At that moment, the princess was called in front of the man who was left speechless.
She stepped forward with a dignified attitude, stood in front of the man, and gracefully bowed.
The princess's appearance showed her unique dignity and composure, unperturbed by this sudden situation. Her eyes were calm and shone as if hiding a firm belief in the future.
"Your Majesty, please don't be hasty."
The king, not listening to his servants trying to stop him, told the princess, "Princess, if you have the power to steer everything in a good direction, and don't need to borrow the power of me, the king, Then become this man's wife and prove it.
I understand, Father. No matter what you say, Father, I am endowed with a mysterious power. Well then, Father, farewell.
The princess said firmly and left the castle with the man.
After leaving the castle, the princess asked the man who had become her husband as they walked, "What about your parents?"
My father was once the wealthiest man in the town of Shravasti, second to none. However, he suddenly died from an unexpected illness. My mother also went mad with grief and died following my father. I was left alone and completely deceived by bad people, falling into such a decline. I've come to thoroughly hate myself. It's pathetic.
That's really unfortunate. But it's okay now. I have a mysterious power. You will become happy very soon. By the way, do you remember where you used to live?
I remember, but I have no intention of going back to such a place now. Even if I did go back, the fence would be broken and the walls would have completely collapsed. Why do you ask such a thing?
I want to go to the place where you used to live. Please take me there once.
As the princess, now his wife, persistently asked.
The man couldn't refuse and had no choice but to guide the princess back to his former mansion. On the way, the man was filled with complex emotions as he thought of his past glory and his current fallen state.
However, the princess's profile was overflowing with determination and kindness, and the man somehow mustered his courage.
Just being with her somehow makes me feel like I can get courage.
When they arrived at the former mansion, as he had imagined, there was no trace of what it was like when he lived there. The area was completely overgrown with grass. Fragments of walls and old wells covered in grass and trees, reminiscent of past glory, told of times gone by.
So this is where your house used to be. The princess murmured as if talking to herself and walked around as if searching for something.
At her feet, remnants of flowers that would have adorned the former garden could be seen here and there.
And she walked as if gently stroking them.
The man, not understanding what the princess was trying to find in this desolate place, simply followed her.
The princess's eyes seemed to be going back and forth between the past and present, as if immersed in some deep thought. At that moment, suddenly, the place where the princess had walked sank deeply, and dazzling light was shining on the sunken ground.
Look, darling, come here for a moment.
When the man rushed over at the princess's voice, there were lots of shining gold and silver treasures.
I'm sure this is what my father buried for me. As the man thought that, he couldn't help but believe in his wife's mysterious power.
Thanks to this fortune, the two were able to have a wedding ceremony. And within less than a month, they built a splendid mansion and started living a prosperous life with many servants.
Around that time at the castle, the king was worrying about the princess and lost in thought. He asked himself over and over again if his decision had been right. As he gazed into the distance from the castle window, he let out a deep sigh. How long has it been since my daughter left the castle? Living with such a man, what kind of life is she leading now? Was my decision too harsh for her? No, but this was also for her growth. I couldn't have been wrong. I couldn't have been wrong.
One of the ministers who heard these words told the king about the princess's situation that he had heard rumors about. Your Majesty, there is no one in the entire city who doesn't know about the princess and her husband. According to what I've heard, it's said that their house and treasures may even surpass this castle. Of course, they have hired many servants and are living happily. Their mansion is said to be like a palace in a fairy tale.
I see, in such a short time, they have come to live in such a splendid mansion. There is a saying by the Buddha, good deeds bring good rewards. and bad deeds bring bad rewards. And it seems that it was indeed true. By giving her a trial, my daughter proved her own power and gained happiness. Yes, that must be it. In other words, I wasn't wrong. Somehow, my heart feels lighter. The king felt deeply moved in his heart, and while acknowledging his daughter's growth, he also renewed his conviction in his own actions.
Around the same time, the princess was also thinking about her father. The princess, wanting her father to see her current splendid way of life, thought of inviting him to their home and asked her husband.
The husband immediately went to the castle and made an offer to the king. "Your Majesty, please come to our home by all means. Through the princess's power, we have built a splendid mansion and can now live without any inconvenience." The princess's mysterious power was real. The man guided the king and returned home. As the king set foot in the mansion, he was astonished by the elegant way of life that did not belie the rumors. "It's even more luxurious than my lifestyle."
Inside the house, beautiful, colorful carpets were laid out, and each room was furnished with magnificent furniture and furnishings. Also, the well-tended garden was filled with brightly colored flowers in full bloom. Everything there was so wonderful that it surpassed the royal palace.
Father, I have always lived according to the teachings of the Buddha. The Buddha granted me this mysterious power. Good deeds always bring good results, and bad deeds always bring bad results.
The princess said with a smile.
You are certainly right. Even if one boasts of military power or financial power, it is only temporary. Even without such things, having something to believe in from the heart is truly powerful. You have thus proven that power. But why do you have that power? Anyway, from now on, cherish the teachings of the Buddha even more. After returning from his daughter's mansion to the castle, the king then went to the Buddha and asked, "O Buddha, what kind of good deeds did my daughter accumulate in her previous life to be born into the royal family and gain the power to steer anything in a good direction?"
The Buddha answered the king's question and spoke quietly. A long time ago, in the time when there was a Buddha named Vipassana. When Vipassana Buddha passed away, the king at that time, mourning his death, built a 7-jeweled stupa to enshrine the Buddha's bones.
The queen also removed the ornaments from her crown and placed them on the top of Vipassana Buddha's statue, and took a jewel from the crown and attached it to the tip of the Buddha's staff.
Then the dazzling light shone all over the world. At that time, the queen prayed as follows:
"In the next life, may dazzling golden light shine from my body. May I be respected by people, and may I be able to live a prosperous life."
The queen at that time is the current princess.
To the king, who was listening intently, the Buddha spoke further.
Long ago, in the time of Kashyapa Buddha, something like this also happened.
A woman tried to offer food to Kashyapa Buddha and his disciples, but her husband tried to stop her. However, the wife pleaded with him many times and finally gained her husband's permission to make the offering.
The husband at that time is actually the current princess's husband, and the woman at that time is actually the current princess.
The husband, as a result of hindering his wife's wish, came to live in poverty.
But later, as a reward for listening to his wife's wish, he was able to become a wealthy man as he is now. However, if his wife were to disappear, he would return to his original way of life. In this way, there has never been any deviation in the rewards for good and bad deeds. It is due to the law of cause and effect, and our actions will always bring results.
The king was deeply moved by the Buddha's words and reflected on his own actions and their consequences. He began to understand that the hardships his daughter had experienced were actually an important step in opening the way to her growth and happiness. The king discarded his arrogant heart and regained humility and understanding, and he sincerely worshipped the Buddha and returned to the castle. On his way back to the castle, he deeply reflected on his way of thinking and attitude, and developed a new understanding and respect for his daughter.
The series of stories have the actions of the queen, the king's daughter, and the law of cause and effect as themes, and from that perspective, the following significances can be found. The first is the inner strength and independence of women. The princess, the central character of the story, constantly maintains her inner strength and convictions.
Without being swayed by external circumstances or the opinions of others, she symbolizes the independence and mental strength of women by forging her own path.
The second is the influence and decision-making power of women.
The princess shapes her own destiny with her own hands.
The way her decisions have a significant impact on the people and situations around her emphasizes the decision-making power and influence of women. The third is the spirit of compassion and giving of women.
The compassion the princess showed in her past lives leads to her happiness in the present life.
This suggests that the compassion and consideration for others that women possess will always produce good long-term results. The fourth is the change in position regarding gender.
In the story, the princess goes from being a woman who marries a poor man, considered to be in a socially inferior position, to a position where she builds wealth and happiness through her own power.
This shows that women can overcome difficult situations and improve their social status through their own power. Overall, through the strength, independence, influence, and compassion of women, this story conveys the message that women can shape their own destinies and have a significant impact on those around them.